Commission meeting of Wednesday, January 20th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Our first, our order of business is to introduce commissioners. I'm Carol Spencer. I'm chairperson of the commission. Would you each introduce yourselves, please?
Jon Emery. Doug Gallagher.
Anuprit Manhas.
We're waiting for Ruth. Did you chime in yet?
Ruth, you are muted.
I see. Yeah, I see that now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So this is Ruth Hulstrom.
And Mike?
Hi, this is Eugenio Matabag or Jean Matabag. Hi.
And Jean, right now we're doing commissioner introductions. When we get to an
I'm sorry.
We'll have the public speak when we get to the
Excuse me.
So hang on.
Mike, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I said my name, but I said it at the same time somebody else did.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. Thank you.
That's quite all right.
Okay, you should each have in front of you a copy of the proposed agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to this agenda? And I'd like a motion for approval, please.
So moved. Jon Emery.
This is Ruth Hulstrom. I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving this evening's agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. Thank you. Our agenda is approved. You should also have a copy of the minutes of December 16th, 2020, the last time we met. Are there any additions or corrections to these minutes? If not, I would welcome a motion of approval.
This is Doug. I'll move approval.
A second. Mike Clayton, thank you. All those in favor of approving the minutes of December 16, 2020, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. Thank you. The minutes have been approved. Our next item on the agenda is public forum. This is when any public members would like to speak on an item before the commission that is not on our agenda this evening. Do we have any public members wishing to speak? Hearing none, I will close the public forum. Item number 6 on our agenda is a voluntary annexation for 4514 Hyde Avenue. Would staff like to give us an overview of this, please?
I will. I'm going to be presenting it tonight for Ray Anderson. He's unavailable tonight.
Thank you, Kelly.
Toggle screens here just a second. So up on your screen should be the location map for the annexation that we're discussing tonight. We're talking about 4514 Hyde Avenue, which you see outlined here in black. It's adjacent to the city along Hyde Avenue and has a little bit of shared property line with Ada Hayden. As you can see, the properties to the north are currently outside of the city. They're in the county, and the property across the street is in the city, and it's a site that's owned by the Hunziker companies for future development. The Hunziker companies have asked for this piece of property to be annexed as well. It meets the land use policy plan designation as part of the North Growth area. It abuts the city, and there is no recommended 80-20 annexation of any other property with this. So staff believes it's consistent with city policy and supports moving forward with its annexation. And then if there's any questions about it, Here.
Yes. If there are any questions, could you ask Kelly, please?
Yes, I have a question. Okay, what is, I guess, what does the city of Ames benefit from having this annexation?
What's the benefit to Ames?
Yes.
Currently, there's probably two from a organization of the city and having regular boundaries. There's kind of a jigsaw puzzle here along Hyde where certain properties have chosen not to annex in the past. So it's better for the city and the county to have uniform boundaries. This is one step in that direction. It's something that we had tried to allow for its annexation in the past, but it was not permitted at the state level. So we're happy to see it come in to help our uniform boundaries question. I think the other part of it is it is in our North Growth area, so it does allow for expansion of the city in this area as a policy. Expansion of the city allows for additional housing opportunities. I think the applicants here, and they can speak to it. I'm not saying that this site's going to be redeveloped necessarily, but I think it does help facilitate their development of the project across the street in the future.
You say it's going to help across the street being developed?
Yeah, I'll let the applicant speak to that because I don't actually have a development plan for that site to really talk about it in detail. But it will help facilitate development along Hyde Avenue.
And as I read that Hunsaker is the one that owns this?
Yes.
But there's no actual benefit for the city of Ames.
I guess I didn't say that. I said having uniform boundaries is definitely a benefit to the city and to the county. And then it would facilitate development that's consistent with our land use policy plan. So I would say it is a benefit to the city.
Hey, Kelly, this is Ruth Hulstrom. I have a quick question. So at what point, I guess, with the properties that are north of here, would it be considered kind of creating an island, I guess?
So that's what we went through about 2 years ago. It's legally not an island. There's at least a 50-foot wide swath of land that you can't see on this map that heads out west to meet the state standards for not being an island. We had tried to encourage other people to annex a couple of years ago. They chose not to do that. And as I said, the City Development Board didn't let us use 80-20 at that time to minimize the number of properties that are outside the city either. So this is where we stand today.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for Kelly?
I had a quick one.
Oh, go ahead.
Kelly, could you speak to a little bit on some of the traffic concerns that have repeatedly been brought in the past along Hyde Avenue as we continue to grow in the north? As this is getting annexed into the city, what would you, I guess, is there any insight on how some of the traffic might be managed in the future? Do you have anything that you can share?
I don't personally see this property as changing any of the traffic discussion that's been covered in the past. This site obviously has a home on it. It's fairly significant. It has steep slopes. There's not a lot of intensification that's going to happen with this site. The city built the road as it is now, understanding what the traffic projections are. The complaints have typically been on the Bloomington Heights neighborhood to the south, that the additional traffic is flowing through a residential area, which is true. There's a planned traffic signal installation. I don't recall if it's planned in the CIP for 2021, but I know a design has at least been done at the intersection of Hyde and Bloomington. The county does discuss 190th Street and the increases in rural traffic along 190th Street. And so right now there's no improvements planned for Hyde and 190th Street, but that's something that would be looked at through the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which does the transportation planning on a more regional basis.
Thank you.
Address your the question?
Yes, kind of. I've just, in fact, even until very recently, heard from some residents in the area just south of that. What is it? I forget. I don't see the street really. The north edge, or rather the south edge of 4514, the site. I've heard from some residents just south of that, just about the increased traffic and speed, especially with which some of the cars travel up and down Hyde Avenue. So just curious if there have been ongoing discussions or if that's been brought up again. So this is helpful, something to keep on the radar. Thank you.
Was there another question?
No, I didn't have a question, but I was just going to make a comment that this is Clayton. That this property, if it ever was redeveloped, because it is almost 7 acres, if it ever was redeveloped, then it would be redeveloped within the city then. So that we do have that benefit.
Thank you. I'd like to open a public hearing on this. Excuse me? I'd like to open a public hearing on this voluntary annexation. Are there members with us tonight willing to speak? And if you are, please give your name and your address before you speak.
I believe the applicant is here if you would like them to be the first speaker, Carol.
That would be great. Thank you, Kelly.
Well, good evening, Commission. Justin Dodge, Hunsaker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. Thanks for having me tonight. Kind of excited to be back in meetings. Seems like we've been out of this mix for too long, but we got voluntary annexation in front of us. This complies with the plans for the city. One of the things that John had asked about benefits to the city. So the property taxes for this will now go into the city. So there are benefits to the city. As far as our plans, we plan on leaving the current home on the site, ultimately selling that off, possibly adding another lot. Obviously, great views overlooking Ada Hayden. And then the other benefit that we're looking at was adding a pond. And so that would be stormwater detention for the land that's on the west side of the road. So obviously some great benefits to that as we want to contain that stormwater and protect Ada Hayden and that backup drinking water supply. So I'm here for any questions, but certainly appreciate your guys' time this evening.
Thank you, Justin. Do you have any questions for Justin?
Yes, I do. What's your benefit again? Is just to be able to develop this in the city?
Yeah, so the city controls everything within 2 miles of the boundary.
Right.
And so nothing can happen or no changes can happen to this property unless it's inside the city limits. And one of the real benefits that we were looking at was stormwater detention. And so rather than utilizing land that's on the west side of the road for stormwater detention, because there is quite a bit of relief, as Kelly spoke to, we can actually have that stormwater detention on the east side of the road. And so we can actually have more homes than on the west side of the road because we're having the pond and the stormwater detention on the east side of the road.
And you're looking at further developing south of the house. And the stormwater retention will be in front of the house?
It would be, yeah, our current layouts, John, are south of that because it falls off quite a bit as it goes south. And so that's where we would have a pond.
Okay. That answers a lot of questions of what's going on here. I was just wondering why all of a sudden you wanted to have it annexed.
Yep. And so you guys will see this come back again as soon as we're in the preliminary plat stage.
Other questions for the developer?
This is Diane McCauley. I'm a resident that lives south of there on Eisenhower Lane. I guess I'm trying to put my arms around this, and it's maybe preliminary before we get to the plat section, but that land there falls off quite dramatically from the house down to a pretty large drainage ditch that leads into Ada Hayden. And I'm just wondering how wise it is to have stormwater retention next to that close of a direct access to Ada Hayden. And if that's preliminary before we get to zoning or anything else, we can, I'm just trying to picture how this would work.
What's your sense of the timing of this, Kelly, for the discussion of this particular issue?
Well, the issue of stormwater and design would really come at the platting level.
Okay.
The whole area is covered by our conservation subdivision ordinance, which requires a set aside of 20% of development area to address stormwater. We also have our chapter 5B, which has the quantitative and qualitative water quality standards as well. So the proposed stormwater feature that may be proposed here would definitely be scrutinized by the municipal engineer against the city codes. And we're very sensitive to how water flows into Ada Hayden, so that'll definitely get addressed on how the system gets designed in the future.
Thank you.
We would certainly invite you to come back with any thoughts or comments when it gets to that stage before the commission. We appreciate your interest. Are there other folks who would like to speak on this issue?
And I just might mention one other thing. We do, in our particular development here, we have had some problems with water in basements and that sort of thing because of drainage issues. And I just would want to make sure at that point that our properties are appropriately protected as well.
That's understandable. Thank you.
But
very
thank
much.
you.
Hmm?
I'll wait till the next go around.
Great. We look forward to it. Are there others who would like to speak? And we'll close the hearing. Are there any comments, conversations amongst commission members on this particular issue before I ask for a motion? In that case, I would ask for a motion regarding the voluntary annexation for 4514 Hyde Avenue.
This is Ruth Hulstrom. I would move to approve the alternative one that the Plan and Zoning Commission can recommend to City Council that they approve the request to annex parcel E located at 4515 Hyde Avenue, subject to the following, essentially requiring a development agreement for future Xenia water buyout prior to approval of the annexation.
Is there a second to that motion?
This is Doug. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve alternative one as it is in your background materials. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, please indicate by saying nay. That motion passes. Thank you.
And so this item will move forward to City Council. There's a little bit of delay as we go through the notification process, but City Council will keep this meeting or look at this request later this spring.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Our next agenda item is a zoning and text amendment for Downtown Service Center, the DSC parking amendment. And can we have Ben, are you the person to give us the overview of that tonight?
I am, yes.
Please go ahead.
Sure. Let me just pull up we're going to be discussing the Downtown Service Center zoning DSC. Let me just pull up the map of that. You give us some context. There we go. And the red there is DSC. So at their December 22nd meeting, the City Council discussed a request from a property owner to initiate the next amendment to the residential parking requirement in the district. In the letter to council, Jerry Nelson, who I believe is also with us tonight, asked the council to consider reducing the number of parking spaces in order to facilitate residential development and rehabilitation within the downtown. Currently, the zoning ordinance and the exhibit there of all the parking is in attachment B. Yes, and the zoning ordinance does not require parking for most commercial uses in DSC. Most residential uses, including apartments, single family and two family, are required to have one space per residential unit. And the same is true in CSC currently, which is Campus Town. And the one space per residential unit is actually a reduction from what is required within the rest of the city and all the other zones. At that meeting in December, the council responded to Mr. Nelson's request and directed staff to proceed with changes to the zoning ordinance, allowing for apartment buildings of up to 18 units to be exempt from parking for units that have 2 bedrooms or fewer. So that means that apartments with 3 bedrooms or more would continue to be required to provide parking at 1 space per residential unit. Any project with a mix would be required to provide parking accordingly. So if you had an 18-unit building in DSC, it was all, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, or efficiencies, then you wouldn't have to provide any. If you had an 18-unit building where half of the units had 3 bedrooms or more, half had 2 bedrooms or less, then you would only have to provide 9 spaces. But what this does mean, and what council's direction was, is that if you have a 19-unit apartment building, then that would, regardless of number of bedrooms, would have to be required to provide 19 spaces, which is what is currently required under the DSC today. So it's not the first 18 units, it's 18 units or fewer with 2 bedrooms are exempt. So that's very specific. Council at that same meeting also directed staff to explore potential changes to remote parking requirements and the use of public parking spaces downtown as additional options to support housing within the central part of Ames. Currently, remote parking is only allowed within 300 feet and must be available in perpetuity. There's some additional background there in the addendum that I won't go into, but staff is still studying some of those other changes, and so those may come back in the future. Staff does recommend, staff does believe that the parking reduction for these small to medium-sized apartment projects in DSC is appropriate based on the vision for downtown described in the land use policy plan. We believe that it will help to make downtown a place that is active for 24 hours. These sorts of parking reductions are not uncommon in urban areas. Local examples in Iowa include both Decorah and Burlington. And as an example of another college town, Champaign, Illinois also does not require parking in its downtown. Staff does recommend that the city council, or rather recommend that the planning commission recommend the city council adopt the reduction. And I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ben. Do we have any questions for Ben regarding this, this item?
Yes, I do.
Hi, Ben.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, this is Ruth Hulstrom. Benjamin, I was just wondering, I understand kind of just based on the staff report that was provided why the 18 unit threshold was provided. But you said examples like Decorah and Champaign and Burlington. Essentially, with those examples, were all of those that were included, did they have essentially no parking requirements in the downtown district for residential units, or was there a threshold placed, I guess, similar to what essentially what's being proposed here?
I don't have my notes right in front of me. I do remember specifically that Decorah and Burlington required no parking in their what was their equivalent of DSC. Champaign, I'm 90% certain that Champaign was the same way. So it's no parking for any uses in their downtown zoning district, basically.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
John, you had a question?
Yes, aren't we just shoving a parking problem or creating a parking problem in the surrounding areas by not requiring any parking?
I think the question with parking is always about trade-offs. So I think just about everyone who studied the issue would say that parking is a really inefficient use of land. It doesn't generate tax revenue. It doesn't generate profit for the owner. It is a whole lot of asphalt that is impervious coverage that is not good for the environment. Parking begets more parking. Parking begets more driving. It's kind of a feedback loop. Could it be that the residents of this building will park, nearby? It's entirely possible. I think what you're going to see, I think another possibility is that the kind of people, you won't live in this building, you won't choose to live in this building unless you're willing to accept that, okay, there's not a parking space and maybe I'll do without one. The Sheldon Munn, for instance, has no parking. Now that's obviously an example where it is grandfathered in, it is an existing, that building obviously has been there for a very long time and was originally a hotel, now converted to apartments, has no on-site parking. And people rent apartments there, knowing that people are either taking, the bus to campus or riding a bike, perhaps, or I don't know how many people in Ames just simply do without a car. I don't know how feasible that really is, but people do manage. And I don't know of any, staff is not aware of any big complaints about parking, a proliferation of, or parking issues related to that project.
I know that the downtown has had a parking issue for a long, long time, especially on whenever the businesses really don't care for the farmers market downtown because it takes up all their parking places. But I think this is just going to exacerbate the parking problems in the surrounding area. Then the ideas sounds good, but the parking issue is going to become horrendous unless we come up with like a parking garage downtown.
So John, I'll push back on that a little bit. The city did a comprehensive study of downtown parking last year. We did occupancy surveys of spaces, looked at meter fees and different charges, and really studied how the whole downtown works. And we didn't reach the same conclusion that you asserted, that downtown has a parking problem. There is a stress on certain spaces that are the most convenient, which you would say are the CBD lots in most cases. There was a problem with the timing of parking and meaning the turnover of spaces and how they really addressed employee needs. So the city made a decision to adjust parking meter rates. We also adjusted how employee parking works downtown and changed the hours that you can park in one spot without having to move. What we determined was that really on these other side streets, Burnett, Fifth, Douglas, things in those areas, there really is not a parking problem. It's really about the efficiency of utilizing spaces throughout downtown instead of pressuring one part of the downtown. So from a general operation standpoint, the city does not have a parking problem under current conditions. With that said, a special event is always going to be different. And the second point would be, and this is one reason why I think council picked a smaller project size rather than just waive it in its entirety, is that we do believe we have capacity to absorb some of this into the system. The city has a parallel request to kind of consider, again, how do we look at overnight parking in public places? We have minimal allowances for overnight parking. We have many, many empty parking lots at night in downtown. So we'll look at that as a way to maybe allow for remote parking or offsite parking to meet these needs of residents overnight, and hopefully not have them park on street and walk 3 blocks back into downtown. Some people may do that because it's free to park on the street, but we think at this point we can absorb some trial projects, more than one probably, without a significant impact on street parking in Old Town. But if we start to see that, the city can do a couple of different things. The city can, again, try to make other spaces available in downtown. We have the ability, if we ever chose to create permit parking, if that's necessary to manage on-street parking in these residential areas. So at this point, city staff's really confident there's not a parking problem, and to start with small projects really shouldn't exacerbate any real problems with overnight parking that there's an abundance of at this point in time in downtown.
But this DSC area is all through the whole downtown area. Am I correct in that?
Yep. So I think if Benjamin's screen's still up, all of that red area is downtown, plus the turquoise SGA is the government properties that are downtown as well.
But I don't see how this will not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhoods.
I think our main point is if you were at City Hall tonight with the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, we could all look out the window and see empty parking lots and empty street parking with nothing there. So that's why we believe that a change in city policy about overnight parking is the fastest solution. If there was a problem and a need for additional parking, the city could respond to that and make overnight parking easier to do downtown without having to push people into Old Town. That's the perspective that we have about the availability of parking, especially at night.
Well, yes, I understand that at night there's empty ones, but I've talked to numerous businesses downtown, and they're not happy right now with the parking at all. And just raising the rates does nothing but drive people away from downtown.
But I think you're conflating two different issues then. So the city did the parking meter fees last year, and again, we did do an occupancy study to really get to that question about how are people using spaces that are downtown and what are the peaks and where are the peaks in usage.
Additional questions on this issue?
Hi, this is Anuya. I'll tag on to John's discussion with the concerns expressed in Main Street businesses specifically. I do think this is one more step in the right direction with the tax amendment and the reduction in parking. I think that's definitely a step in one more step in the right direction. I do also want to echo what John did mention, though, that we have heard in the past several voices from Main Street businesses expressing concern, whether it be weekend parking or otherwise, raising concerns. Either it's the meter prices or just lack of parking. So I guess I have two sort of points, not necessarily questions. But maybe one is a question. The first one just being that I'm wondering if the department and the city has had opportunities to have some communication with Main Street. I don't know if it's through chamber or directly with businesses to sort of get them on board with some of these changes that are being proposed tonight. That's number one. And number two, Kelly, I liked what you mentioned earlier, where the city could be pretty quick and agile in making changes if there were to be any specific concerns or issues that come up in the next few months or so. And one of the key points definitely there was trying to see if there could be, I don't know, shared parking arrangements specifically for overnight parking. And I'm wondering if the city could somehow not necessarily push for it, but strongly encourage some kind of parking agreements or those sorts of arrangements going forward to address some of the those might not be issues. Let's hope so. But if those issues were to come forward, maybe that is one of the things that could be looked at.
I'll take the first question. We haven't had specific. We haven't polled the downtown businesses about what they think about the change to DSC. Is the direct answer. I have had conversations with property owners in the past who would like to, specifically with second story spaces, who would like to turn space that is vacant or underutilized into apartments. And we have told them, no, you can't do that without providing on-site parking, and they aren't able to do that. And so, nothing happens there. And then the second question, Commissioner, what was that again? I'm sorry.
The second was not necessarily a question. It was just something that I kind of agree with, which was brought up, was the city's flexibility in making changes if needed. And one of the things I feel could be probably explored more is some kind of parking arrangements or shared parking arrangements for overnight parking or such if the issue were to arise.
Yeah, so City Council, when they initiated this text amendment, they also asked us to come back and review remote parking and see if that might be a solution for some people as well. So it could be private remote parking, or maybe it's an option to do the public lots with reserved parking overnight anyways. So that's something that's separate from the text amendment. We'll be responding back to City Council on.
Thank you, Kelly.
And so if there were changes to remote parking standards, I think we outlined them in the staff report. They're fairly limited right now. You have to find a spot that's within 300 feet of your property where you're supposed to have the parking. And then if you do find a spot, it has to be essentially guaranteed in perpetuity. And that's a really tough standard to meet. It doesn't allow for like annual flexibility in trying to find a space or anything along those lines. So the remote parking standard is really tight right now, and we'll look at that. It's in the zoning ordinance. There may or may not be a benefit to changing it, but it's something that the council has asked us to review as well.
Are there other questions?
Oh,
go ahead, Ruth.
Sorry, this is this is Ruth Hulstrom again. I was curious. I know that downtown parking study was done, and definitely as Anu and John kind of both mentioned, I've definitely heard, some downtown business owners have concerns over issues with parking. I do also feel like the proposed text amendment is kind of a move in the right direction. But I also want to make sure we're aware of the concerns of some of the downtown property owners. So I was wondering, with that parking study that was done, were downtown business owners polled at all? Just to figure out, their concerns over potentially changes to the downtown parking. And was any conversation, I guess, had with the folks at Sheldon Munn, prior to sort of this text amendment coming about, just to understand better, how residents of that building are managing without having, I guess, parking readily available to them.
So the first part was the Sheldon Munn question I got, Ruth. What was the first part?
Sorry, the first question was just in regards to whether or not the parking study that was done a year or so ago, whether or not that tried to survey or better understand downtown business owners' perception of the parking situation at all. And then the second one was about the.
So the downtown study was a 9 to 12 month effort. It had a task force with representatives of businesses. It had, it was a full-fledged, in-depth, stakeholder-based study that also used not just people's opinions, but did video recording of spaces to measure occupancy. We had Walker parking consultants prepare the study for us and really review a lot of different data sets to reach the conclusions. And it's still online if people want to do that. So that study was definitely a publicly available and inclusive study and attempt by city council to respond to some very, very strong objections to parking changes and how things operated prior to that study. So I think city council really was being responsive to the interests of downtown that really asked for that kind of study to really look at how we operate and how we manage public parking downtown. So knowing that that's only a year old, it was finished in December of 2019. We did not believe there was another review of parking situation or parking conditions that was really necessary. The current conditions have been in place for less than 12 months. And again, those conclusions would not have changed. Nothing in downtown has changed since that study was done and completed in December of 19. Benjamin, I haven't recently talked to anybody at the Sheldon Munn, so I wouldn't feel like I could give you a competent answer to how they perceive their residents park or don't own cars or how they address the parking situation. I don't know if Benjamin, if you've been in touch to the Downtown Association or with the Sheldon Munn's current owner, who's only owned it, the current owner's only owned it for maybe 6 months. But obviously it's been residential apartments for much longer than that.
I have not had that specific, I have not asked that specific question, but I'm happy to do so and to, out there.
We have reserved stalls. I know that, I don't know how many of the residents do it. We do have reserved overnight stalls in the CBD lots up against the railroad. And we do know some residents take advantage of that, but I don't know if it's half or a third or really what percentage take advantage of it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, Kelly. I just want to try to get a gauge in terms of what, I guess, information has been gleaned regarding sort of perceptions of downtown business owners in the parking situation. And then, like I said, since there is that one existing, residential structure that does not have required parking, I was curious to know, obviously, how they've been managing and how that's potentially, in terms of marketing the spaces and things like that, how that's maybe impacted them.
Yeah, I can kind of speak to that. I don't think that it affects occupancy. I think they're pretty full. I don't think the lack of on-site parking spaces is a serious deterrent. That's the impression I've gotten.
Are there other questions?
Thank you.
Yes, I have another one, Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
You say you have not contacted any of the businesses downtown about this DSC?
We did not poll anybody know about this.
I guess I'm real concerned about that you haven't talked to anybody down there about the change.
I think to what Kelly was saying, the study that we just did that did reach out to the downtown business owners that was just completed at the end of 2019 showed the parking concerns. I suspect that a lot of them were on Main Street, and this being off Main Street will probably not impact those concerns very heavily.
I mean, to be fair, that it applies to all downtown, so it's not just Main Street. I guess, John, and the conversations of parking downtown are ongoing. They may not be recent in the last few months, but it's been a conversation for on and off again for over 5 years. And one thing that Benjamin pointed out one of the complaints we get from property owners is that they can't add second floor apartments, which this amendment would allow. So for everyone that thinks that there's not enough parking on Main Street, there's other people that want to have more flexibility to use their space in a different way. And the parking has been an impediment to do that. So I think, I mean, there will be notification as we move forward to this process, just as there always is. And we usually reach out to the Downtown Association and have them spread the word, as well as our normal public notice process. And that'll happen as well before we get to City Council. Technically, the Planning and Zoning Commission is not holding a public hearing, so there's no prescribed notification process before tonight. So that's one reason why we haven't had a chance to do that as we move this ahead, but it's something that we'll definitely make the Main Street area aware of this as we go forward.
Other questions? Are there community members wishing to speak on this issue? In that case, I would welcome a motion on the zoning text amendment for downtown service center parking.
This is Doug. I'll make a motion that the City Council adopt the changes to the minimum parking for development of 18 apartments to less to eliminate parking for units with 2 bedrooms or less within the downtown service center zoning district.
Clayton, second.
We have a motion and a second to pass alternative 1, adopting the changes to minimum parking for development of 18 apartments or less to eliminate parking for units with 2 bedrooms or less within the DFC's zoning district. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The issue passes with alternative 1. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a small lot zoning discussion. Which staff member, Kelly, will you be the person just, or Eloise?
Eloise is going to go through the presentation.
All right. Hi, Eloise. Would you please give us an overview on this small lot zoning discussion?
You bet. Let me just get my screen up here. Sorry about that. Well, I'm trying to get to my PowerPoint. Kelly, would you be able to pull up the PowerPoint?
Do you want me to use the commission form, or is it on the network somewhere?
It's both, either one. Well, the one on the network's in color.
Commission one is.
That would be best. I'll just start talking while he's pulling that up. I appreciate that, Kelly. So what you have before you is you have some information on small lots. This was something that the City Council requested as a goal, that we look at a zoning text amendment to move something forward. So what we did is we prepared a lot of information and we took it to the council back in June and gave them an extensive report, as well as the same PowerPoint that you're going to have tonight. And so what the council, in the PowerPoint, as I go through it, I'll show you some details. But basically what the council decided is they took options, and they went with 3 options that they wanted to pursue further. One option was to have allowed by right a smaller lot width and lot size. So it would be a base zone allowed by right to simply have smaller properties available. The second was to have a mix of up to 20% of a development to be smaller lots and or smaller homes. And that would then also provide flexibility. The third option was to create a planned unit development as an option, which would be kind of like our PRD, where it just allows a lot of flexibility to a developer. And so with those three options as directives from the council asked us to meet with developers to see what kind of input that they would have for us, if they had any preference or what concerns they might have. So
I'm just about there. I'm just trying to get the share screen to work. If that doesn't work, I can switch.
maybe I need to, yeah, I don't know. So with that, we met with developers. There wasn't a huge group of developers. We had contacted quite a few, but most of the ones that were in attendance were people who are very active in development within Ames and have been for a long time. And so the developers talked about some of their concerns and issues. And we also talked about some of our concerns and issues in that once you have a smaller lot, it does impact some things like privacy. It can impact location of driveways and on-street parking availability and some of that kind of thing. So, so with this, you can go to